Welcome to the Quotive Corner. Today's quote is one of those lines that sounds almost like a riddle when you first read it. A little paradoxical, maybe even frustrating, and then it clicks. And once it clicks, you start seeing what it's describing everywhere. The time to relax is when you don't have time for it. That's Sidney J. Harris, an American journalist and syndicated columnist who wrote for the Chicago Daily News and later the Chicago Sun-Times from the 1940s through the 1980s. He was the kind of writer who could distill a complex idea into a single sentence and make it feel inevitable. He's not a household name today, which is part of why I enjoy putting him on the show. His writing holds up remarkably well for someone most people have never heard of. This particular line first appeared in his syndicated column in October 1954. Now, the paradox. On the surface, it reads like a contradiction. How can the time to do something be precisely when you don't have time for it? That's not how time works. If you don't have time for something, the logical response is to acknowledge that and move on. Except, and here's where Harris is being genuinely precise, that's not actually how relaxation works. And the distinction between how time works and how relaxation works is exactly where the insight lives. The common assumption about relaxation is that it belongs to downtime, to the gaps, the vacations, the empty Sundays when nothing is demanding your attention. You earn it by finishing what needs to be done, and then, in the space that remains, you rest. Relaxation as reward. Relaxation as what happens when the pressure has been removed. Harris is pointing at something that anyone who has actually been through a sustained period of intense pressure knows to be true. By the time you get to the empty Sunday, you're often too depleted to enjoy it. The tension that built up during the busy period doesn't simply evaporate when the schedule clears. It lingers in the body, in the nervous system, in the mind that can't quite stop generating to-do lists, even when the to-do list is technically empty. The relaxation arrives when you're least equipped to receive it. The fuller version of the quote, which Harris wrote in his original 1954 column, makes the point even more explicitly. The time to relax is when you don't have time for it, because when you get the time, you are generally too exhausted to enjoy it. That's the complete observation. The exhaustion precedes the opportunity, and by the time the opportunity arrives, the capacity for genuine restoration has already been spent. What Harris is really arguing for is relaxation as a practice woven into the demanding period itself, not as a reward waiting on the other side of it, but as a discipline embedded within it. This runs directly counter to how most high-functioning, ambitious people think about rest. The prevalent mental model is essentially work hard, then rest. Earn it, then take it. Finish the hard thing, then allow yourself the ease. Harris is suggesting that this sequencing is precisely backwards, that the hard thing goes better and the person doing it survives it better when the ease is built in rather than deferred. The science, as it's developed in the decades since Harris wrote this, consistently supports him. Cognitive performance degrades under sustained pressure without recovery. Creativity, the kind that produces genuine insight rather than just incremental output, requires mental states that are incompatible with constant activation. Decision quality drops when the brain has been running at high intensity without rest. The person who works 12 hours without pause doesn't produce more than the person who works 9 with genuine recovery built in. They often produce less, and what they produce is of lower quality, while also accumulating a physiological and psychological debt that eventually demands repayment at a premium. In a previous episode, I talked about how Jack Nicklaus described concentration as the antidote to anxiety, the state of complete present moment absorption that crowds out the nervous system's tendency to project into worst-case futures. Relaxation, genuine relaxation, operates on the same principle from the other direction. It's not the absence of activity, it's the presence of restoration, a deliberate shift in the nervous system's mode that allows recovery to actually occur. And like concentration, it's a trainable discipline rather than a passive reward. It has to be built into the structure of how you operate, not hoped for at the end of it. This has a practical implication that most people resist. It means the person with the most demanding schedule is precisely the person who most needs to protect space for genuine rest. and is also the person most tempted to eliminate that space in the name of the demanding schedule. The busier you are, the more the relaxation feels like a luxury you can't afford, and the more true it is, by Harris's logic, that you can't afford not to have it. This is also, in a quieter way, an argument about identity. The person who can only relax when the circumstances permit it, when the deadline is passed, when the project is done, when nothing is pressing, has made their capacity for rest conditional on external conditions they don't control. The person who has learned to relax within pressure, to carve out genuine restoration even when the schedule argues against it, has built a resilience that is available regardless of what the calendar says. Now, the honest counterpoint, because this show doesn't skip it. There are genuine situations where the work simply cannot be interrupted, where the deadline is real, the stakes are high, and building in rest time would produce a worse outcome than pushing through. Surgeons in the middle of a procedure don't stop for a restorative walk. Parents in a crisis don't schedule a meditation break. The principle has limits, and acknowledging those limits is part of applying it honestly rather than rigidly. But those genuine exceptions tend to be shorter and rarer than we use them to justify. Most sustained periods of busyness are not operating theaters. Most deadlines, examined honestly, contain more flexibility than the stressed mind assigns them, and the chronic use of exceptional circumstances as the default mode, treating every week as the week when rest can't be afforded, is exactly the trap Harris is naming. The exception shouldn't become the rule, and it so frequently does. Harris wrote this in 1954, in a newspaper column that most people reading it would have encountered over their morning coffee. The world he was writing about was considerably less connected, considerably less always on, and considerably less saturated with demands on attention than the one we're operating in now. The gap between when you technically stop working and when your nervous system actually stops working has only grown wider since then, which means his one-sentence observation from 70 years ago is, if anything, more urgent now than when he wrote it. The time to relax is when you don't have time for it, especially then. Thanks for spending a few minutes here at the Quotive Corner. If this one made you think about what you've been deferring until things slow down, and whether things are actually going to slow down, that's worth a moment of honest consideration. In closing, remember that wisdom isn't in the quote, it's in the reflection. I'll see you in the next episode.